Today, we'll learn about how our European ancestors got here. Immigration to America came in three waves. In wave one, English, Germans, and Scots were fleeing religious persecution and looking for economic opportunities. Records were not required during this wave. If your ancestors arrived then, congratulations. If there are records, they're likely online. Historians think about 1 million immigrants, more or less, came here during this entire first 200 plus years. Between 1820 and 1920, 1 million immigrants a year came in the second and largest wave from Great Britain, Germany, Italy, and Ireland. Some ancestors came to escape laws like only the firstborn son could inherit. Others were escaping famine and local wars. Many of these records are in books or potentially online. The third wave of immigration came after 1920, especially the Russian and European Jews and immigrants from the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was 11 different countries, all due to political turmoil and wars. But you knew that already, right? Many of these records are online. Prior to 1890, the state the port of entry was in regulated immigration into the port. Luckily, arrivals were listed for Philadelphia starting in 1800 and for New Orleans starting in 1813. During the second wave, 20 million Europeans alone came through New York ports. Castle Garden served as the New York State immigration station from 1855 to 1890. Approximately 8 million immigrants entered here, mostly from Northern European countries. Then the federal government built a new immigration station on Ellis Island. Yes, the biggie. Nearly half of all Americans today can trace their family history to at least one person who passed through the port of New York at Ellis Island. Can you? Who were they? 12 million people who could barely afford a ticket to America. The underprivileged and uneducated third-class passengers called steerage, who possessed the greatest risk to go on welfare. Remember the movie Titanic? Many were incredibly innocent, some were disorderly, others were called less than civilized. They were the tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. In 1850, when the census added place of birth to the form, 2.2 million residents listed their birthplace as outside the United States, or about 10% of the total population. By 1880, the number grew to 12%, prompting federal oversight of immigration starting in 1891. Ellis Island closed as an immigration station in 1954 due to immigration quotas starting in the 1920s, which began limiting the number and nationality of immigrants allowed into the United States, ending the era of mass immigration into New York. Today, it is open as a museum and a searchable database of 65 million immigrant records in New York between 1820 and 1957. Registration is free, where you can view scanned images of passenger manifests. You can do a search for your ancestor. Before 1920, immigration from Europe to the US was almost entirely unrestricted. In the 1920s, Congress passed a series of immigration quotas from specific countries, restricting passengers from Southern and Eastern Europe, but not from Northern and Western Europe. Ultimately, immigration fell from 1 million people a year to 150,000, although today it's back up to 1 million per year. Today's limits are on Europeans to encourage immigration from smaller countries that have had little representation previously. Immigration is both a social and a political matter, both at the country of origin and the destination country. Try to get into a conversation about it today without hearing multiple opinions, lots of opinions. Here's a chart to see what countries today's immigrants are from. Today, 7.5% of our population are immigrants, down from 12%. The golden age of immigration. Do you have the same thirst for freedom that your ancestors had? Would you make that kind of trip today if you had to? To make a new life? To raise your children with a new language? All for a better future for your descendants? I thank and celebrate my intrepid immigrants every day for their sacrifices. Now we look at the records to search for our own passengers. First, we see what information is available and what you need to know about your immigrant ancestor for an effective search. This guy, look how happy he is. They're all so happy to be here. We just learned that immigration came in three waves. The laws covering immigration changed with each wave. The first wave was the Wild West of immigration with little oversight and spotty records. After 1820, laws were enacted for safety, prompting 1 million immigrants a year to pour in, many with useful records. When quotas and complex legal requirements started, those numbers of people dropped significantly. But while immigration slowed, the abundance and types of records increased dramatically for the post-1920 era. Let's look at what happened to 52 intrepid Norwegians in 1825, who were the first from their country to immigrate. They bought the ship that they used. At 54 feet, the sloop was the smallest immigrant ship to cross the Atlantic. Because of the questionable abilities of their rented captain and crew, it took them 13 weeks. Perhaps it was because they found a barrel of rum floating in the ocean. And she had too many passengers for her size, breaking American law. Once they reached New York, the ship was confiscated and the captain arrested. They had to sell the ship and cargo to pay the massive fine, money that was earmarked for their settlement costs. Because of the viral media coverage of these so-called sloopers, President John Quincy Adams intervened, releasing the captain and the ship, rescinding the fine. Federal immigration laws had just begun 5 years earlier. In the early 19th century, traveling conditions were often deplorable. Concerned about the safety, health, and well-being of our future ancestors, Congress imposed regulations, specifically the Steerage Act of 1819. Starting in 1820, it limits the number of passengers on incoming vessels to 2 persons per every 5 tons of ship burden or weight. See the calculation? A $150 fine is imposed for every passenger exceeding a ship's legal limit, and a vessel is subject to outright seizure by authorities if it carries more than 20 excess passengers. The Norwegian sloop was way overpopulated. They are lucky they survived the crossing. As a result, the Steerage Act also required the captain to deliver an official passenger manifest or list to a federal officer with ship's burden and passenger count. Those details don't matter to us, but this is what we want right there. The list or manifest of alien or non-US citizen passengers for the United States from a foreign port. Let's see the strategy to help you find your passenger lists. Because there was no central repository, look everywhere. Start in your own family files, just in case. It's worth the time spent digging through them. What are we looking for besides cash? Any early travel documents, immigration records, letters, and personal journals. Where else can one look? Online for sites that have exactly what we need. We just need to know which one. Local libraries through WorldCat that lists where to find the book of your ancestors' records. History museums for documents related to your ancestor. Other archives like county courthouses, which might require an in-person trip. The challenge first is to simply find the list. If you have a paid Ancestry.com account, use it. Bibliographies and name indexes found in libraries can lead you to books or websites. We have a bunch here. Learn to use indexes like Cindy's List and search engines like Google to get more ideas of what is available. For example, on Google.com, I enter pertinent data like immigration records, Heinrich Mahler, 1841. That's my ancestor. And search. Lots of hits, lots and lots. So we have to narrow our search with more details. That's too much information. On cindyslist.com, I see immigration, emigration, and migration. Immigration is when they're coming into the country. Emigration is when they're going out from their country. And migration is when they move around within the country. I click it and see ports of departure. I click it and see Bremen, Germany. I click it and see lots of links to decide on. Lots and lots of records. Unfortunately, this is a quest, a long and difficult journey to find what you seek, because no one repository has all the documents. In your quest for immigrant records, go deep. That means be diligent in one area. Then go wide. That means creative. Be creative in other areas, trying to figure out where it could be. I'll give you more tips along the way, like this. Here's our first quest tip. Review the 1850 and later US federal census for where they say they were born. Often we forget to look at the details. Then in the 1900 through 1930 census, look for immigration clues like year they immigrated. Remember though, like with many other records, verify the information. The person giving the census taker the details might not really know. The 1920 census lists both the year of immigration and naturalization. So don't forget the census. Always look there first.